Hello everyone and welcome to week 11 of English 120. I wanted to show you that I've updated my slide to show my virtual office hours. They are every Monday and Wednesday from 8 to 9 a.m., also from 11 to 12:30 p.m., and on Tuesdays from 10 to 12. But I'm also available for appointments throughout the week. I'd love for you to schedule some time to check in with me if you need help on your assignments as we move forward to the most difficult part of this class, which is writing your research paper. I hope you are all healthy and surviving being cooped up in your houses. I know this is a super challenging time, and I really appreciate your focus in our class. Okay, so today, like most weeks, you'll notice there was a little bit of a switch in the days of the week. We will now be posting content on Tuesday mornings or Monday evening, depending on, but the week will begin on Tuesday mornings and will go until Monday at 11:59 p.m. So you will get my lectures sent to you on Monday nights or Tuesday mornings. And you'll be expected to complete all your work by the following Monday at 11:59 p.m. This week, I'd like you to read chapter 14 in the Bedford Researcher, and this is on drafting. So we're going to actually move towards drafting our research paper in class this week. And at the end of the week on 4/20 at 11:59 p.m., your body paragraphs will be due. You're only going to have to write 2 of them. For your final paper, you'll have to actually write at least 3 body paragraphs. You'll probably need more, but just to practice writing body paragraphs. And this is work that you can reuse when you turn in your research paper. So the more effort you put in now, the better you'll do on your research paper. Our research module this week is, and the lecture is basically on proficiency with sources. I'm not going to talk a lot about drafting, but I will be giving you feedback based on what you draft. And I encourage you to read chapter 14 closely. There's a lot of great information in there. And I will go over how to draft and what's expected of you when I introduce the assignment. Finally, we're going to be reading Whose Names Are Unknown up to the next section where they leave for California. So we'll be reading chapters 20 through 24 up to page 130. So our research project is moving on to the actual writing of your document. You've turned in your outline, hopefully by this point, and now we're going to use that outline to move forward in writing our paper. I know this seems like a slow process for some of you, but the reason why we do this so slow is that you learn all the parts so that when you have to leave this class and write papers in other classes, you're able to follow this process. But first, we're going to start by borrowing some slides from Lisa Yanover, another professor here at Napa Valley College. And these are slides that are referred to in this week's online research unit. But I like to teach these to you because they're really important. So this is everything you need to know, or almost, about integrating quotations effectively. So the main thing to keep in mind when you're integrating quotations is that it takes considerable thought and thoughtfulness or critical thinking. So a lot of times we think, okay, I'm going to find a quote, I'm going to stick it in there, right? You don't think about how you can use that quote to best push your argument forward. Ineffective integration of quotations is typically the result of thoughtlessness and often involves dropped-in quotations, also called floating quotations. When quotations are dropped in without any thought in terms of how they fit in the paragraph. There's nothing leading into or introducing the quotation. It's just there, dropped in. The most obvious sign of a dropped-in quotation is its appearance right after a sentence ending in a period or at the end of a complete clause ending in a semicolon. Dropped-in quotations have the potential to become even more serious when the sources they come from are not correctly identified, and this results in plagiarism. The thoughtlessness that results in dropped-in quotations can come from ineffective selection of quotations. Quotations that merely restate the main point that may lead the writer to believe introducing it isn't necessary as the connection is obvious. Thus, the writer needs to put thought into the selection of quotations. intentionally choosing ones that leave room for and even necessitate the writer's interpretation and explanation of them. So, effective placement of quotations is also important, because the purpose of quotations is to support an idea or point out your own. Quotations are most effective in research essays when placed in body paragraphs, what you're going to be writing, which do the work of supporting the thesis. Also keep in mind the three main steps of a body paragraph. So you want a point or a main idea of that paragraph, just one main point. You're going to support that point, you're going to prove that point, and you're going to explanation of the significance of the point in relation to the overall argument or thesis, how it proves and develops that argument. So we can see that quotations clearly belong in step 2 as part of the support. The next step is to weave the quotation into your paragraph and into your argument. As with paragraphs, there are steps to follow when working with quotations. They are: signal phrase with correct punctuation, so either a colon or a comma or nothing depending on what is correct. The quotation, an in-text citation that tells us where that quotation is from, and an explanation that explains what the quote means and how it relates to the point that you're making. So a signal phrase is a phrase that leads up to and prepares for a quotation. Some signal phrases identify the source, its author, title, context, or background. This type of signal phrase is generally called an attributive tag or attribution. There are a number of reasons one might want to use an attributive tag. For example, if an author you're quoting is well known as an expert in his or her field, name dropping of this kind can add to your credibility, that you knew of this expert and that you knew enough to draw upon his or her expert knowledge. If the publication carries some prestige in the field, referring to it can likewise gain you credibility. If the author's ideas are controversial and clearly distinct from your own, you may name him or her in order to distinguish your own ideas and perspective from his or hers. Or if the context, when, where it was published, who wrote it, etc., adds to our understanding of the ideas that you're quoting from. But truly integrating quotations goes beyond merely identifying the author or the source. It involves thinking critically about the connection between the quotation and your main idea. That is what a signal phrase does. It creates a bridge between the different parts of the paragraph and even between the different parts of the support. For example, if the quotation only suggests a connection to your point, a signal phrase before the quotation can prompt your reader to notice what you want him or her to in or about the quotation, and also to pay attention to in or about the quotation, and also help focus your interpretation and explanation of the quotation afterwards, thus prompting you to prove your point. So often signal phrases and attributive tags are used in conjunction with one another. So here's something to keep in mind. Quotations come in four different forms. Okay, there's a short quotation, and that's up to 4 lines once typed into your essay. It's marked with quotation marks at the beginning and end. Parenthetical in text citation is placed after the end of the quotation mark and before the end punctuation of your sentence. A long quotation in prose is 5 lines or more, again, once typed into your essay. The left side is blocked and indented 1 inch, one step further than the paragraph indent. Quotation marks are not used. Blocked quotations are double-spaced, but no extra spaces are placed above or below it. A partial quotation is a type of short quotation. It's a phrase or a clause excerpted from the source that can be incorporated into your own sentence and syntax. Only short quotations can be partial. A complete quotation is a complete sentence that can be introduced by your sentence, set off by a colon. Some short quotations are complete, and all long quotations are complete. And if you want to make some changes to your quotations, I hesitate to tell you about this because I don't want you to do it incorrectly. but ellipses are 3 spaced periods indicating material has been removed from inside of a quotation. 3 spaced periods are used, like this, ... in the middle of a single sentence. A 4th period is needed if you're removing material between 2 complete sentences so as not to create a run-on. The 4th period is placed right next to the word at the end of the sentence, before the material that has been removed. Ellipses are only needed at the end of a quotation if the end of a sentence from the original has been omitted. Ellipses are only needed at the beginning of a quotation if the beginning of the sentence has been omitted and the first word is capitalized, as in this case, the reader may or not be able to tell the part of the sentence has been removed. So basically, don't put ellipses at the beginning or the end of your quotations for this paper. Brackets are used to add clarifying information, such as a word or phrase, or to make changes to the quotation that don't change the meaning, but enable it to fit into its new context. Most of these changes involve small grammatical changes to verb tense or pronouns. For example, the author of the original might use the first person I to refer to him or herself, but you would use the third person, he or she, to refer to him or her. So you'd want to change the way that you'd want to change the pronoun to match the grammatical sense. Okay, so in the next section, you're going to see how one can build a body paragraph and effectively integrate different types of quotations using signal phrases and attributive tags. This is something that I would like you to do in your body paragraphs that you're turning in this week. So the topic of my essay is the sofa, and the article being used is Man at His Best Design by Tom Janot in Esquire on page 70 of the March 2002 issue, found using the NVC library database. My thesis is, to many working adults, sofas represent comfort. The purpose of my essay is to prove this belief and to explain its importance, why comfort is so important to working adults, but even possibly why believing that sofas represent comfort is so important. Each paragraph should add to the reader's and writer's understanding of the thesis, building up to the conclusion where it will finally be developed. So, first, I need to decide on a support point, a main idea for the paragraph, which relates to the thesis and will be used to support it. This sentence is sometimes called the topic sentence or the point sentence, and it will usually begin your body paragraph. For example, sofas may have become ubiquitous, something we see in almost every abode or house, but it's clear they are, nevertheless, often associated with luxury. The point is that sofas are associated with luxury. And if I apply the 3 steps for a body paragraph to my topic, they are: point. My main point is sofas may have become ubiquitous, something we see in almost every abode, but it's clear they are nevertheless often associated with luxury. Number 2, support with evidence, including the quotation. 3, explanation of how and why this idea of sofas as luxury helps prove they represent comfort to working adults. Why is luxury associated with comfort? What is comfortable about luxury? What kind of comfort is suggested? What do this paragraph and point add to our understanding of the meaning and importance of comfort to working adults? Then I need to decide on a quotation I want to use. I like much of the essay, but fair use and my own purpose require that I limit my use of it to only what is relevant. So here's one section of the original I really like. The sectional isn't just a couch. It's a lifestyle, and so is tainted by all the prejudices that taint the word lifestyle itself. The sectional is the jacuzzi of couches. It is the California of couches, not only in terms of size and shape and population density, but also in its perhaps unfair association with recreational immortality. Though most sectionals do yeoman's duty in suburban living rooms, they still manage to be redolent of an orgy because of their Kama Sutra-esque flexibility and because they are far too often made of leather. So even this entire section may not be necessary though. So next I'll see what part or parts of the quotation I really need to use. I realize that the part about the word lifestyle isn't necessary either to understand the author's main idea or to support mine, so I'll remove it. The rest of the quotation all seems to have potential, so I'll leave it in for now. Here's the end result. The sectional isn't just a couch. The sectional is a jacuzzi of couches. It is the California of couches, not only in terms of size and shape and population density, but also in its perhaps unfair association with recreational immortality. Though most sectionals do yeoman's duty in suburban living rooms, they still manage to be redolent of an orgy because of this Kama Sutra-esque flexibility and because they are far too often made of leather. And finally, I need to think critically about how this quotation will fit into the support that I need to make my point. Is it significant and substantial? Can I draw multiple conclusions from it or make multiple observations about it? Could it thus be my major example and the only one I really need? Or will I need more examples in addition to this one in order to prove the point completely and convincingly? Now I'm ready to start building the paragraph. First, I'll re-examine the point, the highlighted first sentence in this paragraph below. Is it clear on its own, or do I need to explain it? Rereading it, I realize I might need to explain the concept of luxury and establish the premise of the sofa as a luxury. You'll see what I've added below. Sofas may have become ubiquitous, something we see in almost every abode, but it's clear they are nevertheless often associated with luxury. As a luxury item, they often come with a high cost. So this is the added part. Some sofas are easily over $1,000. The fact that this expense is unnecessary also categorizes it as a luxury. One may need a place to sit, but one clearly doesn't need a $1,000 place to sit. There are also many sofas that are designed with luxury in mind, with frames of rare woods, cushions filled with down, and upholstery of luxurious fabrics, such as velvet, silk, and leather. Even sofas constructed of less expensive materials increase in cost when increased in size. So now I'm ready to introduce and integrate the source and the quotation. While it's possible to write a simple attributive tag such as Tom Junot writes, I want to integrate this quotation into my support, which means keeping my main idea in the reader's mind. To do this, I need to do more than simply say who wrote it or where it was published. Indeed, the most important element of the signal phrase will be pointing out the emphasis in the passage itself that relates to my point. In addition, however, I have an opportunity to gain some credibility with my name dropping by pointing out that the author is a known and respected journalist. Here's what I came up with. In an article in Esquire, award-winning journalist Tom Junot describes the trend of the sectional sofa, emphasizing its decadence. Note that the facts that Tom Junot is a journalist and has won awards are common knowledge. I found them easily on the internet. I just Googled him. So I don't need to cite them, but I have been careful to put them in my own words. So I'm ready to add the quotation. Here's the paragraph so far along with the quotation. Sofas may have become ubiquitous, something we see in almost every abode, but it's clear they are nevertheless often associated with luxury. As a luxury item, they often come with a high cost. Some sofas are easily over $1,000. The fact that this expense is unnecessary also categorizes it as a luxury. One may need a place to sit, but one clearly doesn't need a $1,000 place to sit. There are also many sofas that are designed with luxury in mind, with frames of rare woods, cushions filled with down, and upholstery of luxurious fabrics, such as velvet, silk, and leather. Even sofas constructed of less expensive materials increase in cost when increased in size. In an article in Esquire, award-winning journalist Tom Junot describes the trend of the sectional sofa, emphasizing its decadence. And then I include the quote. Notice at the end, I've included the page number where this appears. I do not need to put the last name of the author because I've already said that. Now I need to interpret the quotation, pointing out the decadence and explaining how it proves the point, the luxury of sofas. When interpreting and explaining a passage, I'm not just paraphrasing or repeating what the quotation says. I need to think about not only what the quotation means, but how it means it and why. So to prepare, I've got to analyze the quotation, breaking it down into parts and thinking about the meaning and relevance of each part. And yes, I do want you to do this for each of your quotations that you put in your paper. So the quotation is, the sectional isn't just a couch. The word just is the one emphasized here, insisting that the sectional is important, more important even than the couch, but also suggesting couches, at least ones that are sectionals, are important. It's not just an object, it's more important than that. It's important. The sectional is the jacuzzi of couches. Even if someone was to argue that sofas are a necessity, clearly the line is drawn at sectionals, with this analogy that compares sectionals to jacuzzis and by extension to swimming and exercise, so couches to pools. While pools might be used for swimming, exercise, and ultimately health, and so might be considered legitimate and necessary, though arguably owning a pool is not necessary, jacuzzis are used to lounge and relax, and thus selected by Juno because they are most certainly luxury items and symbols of unmistakable decadence. So the rest of the quotation here is, it is the California of couches, not only in terms of size and shape and population density, but also in its perhaps unfair association with recreational immorality. So to much of the rest of the country, and it's important to note that Junod is from New York, California is a symbol of extravagance and decadence. Junot extends the analogy between sectionals and the state, pointing out their similar L-curved shapes, their similar large sizes, and their similar population density, a cute reference to how many people fit on a sectional in contrast to a regular sofa or other states. Also implicitly hinting at their common desirability and popularity. The second half of this sentence, after the but, is what connects most clearly to the decadence, but both by mentioning the sectionals and states' recreational purpose, and of course, their perceived immortality. While not all recreational activities are immoral, it is recreational activities that are deemed immoral, not typically work-related ones. We also often refer euphemistically to doing drugs or having sex as recreational activities, and that association is evoked here. Also, decadence by its nature is considered by Americans to be somewhat immoral. This is a perspective tied to our Puritan origins, also mentioned by Junot in the concluding paragraph of his essay. His judgment of this association as unfair is tongue-in-cheek, but so is the association and overall analogy itself. But the judgment, nevertheless, is serious in pointing out American attitudes towards these subjects. Overall, the essay blends humor and criticism, resulting in satire. Though most, and here's the rest of the quotation we're going to look at. Though most sectionals do yeoman's duty in suburban living rooms, they still manage to be redolent of an orgy because of their Kama Sutra-esque flexibility and because they are far too often made of leather. So interestingly, each of the last three sentences in this quoted passage is longer than the previous one, which suggests the decadence is taking over. The writing in this case, the same way the sectional and its decadence take over the sectional owners' lives and living rooms. The first part of the sentence about the actual work, functionality of sofas, even sectionals, is irrelevant though. It adds seriousness and credibility to Junot's argument. Without it, the reader, especially one who wants to shout, "It's just a sofa," would see the humor, but not the seriousness, and tend to reject any social criticism and awareness the essay might have to offer. The next clause returns to the examination of sectionals as decadent, calling them redolent, so that's suggestive or reminiscent of an orgy. While redolent has neutral connotations, it is a heavier word than other synonyms, like those listed above in brackets, especially in its resonant sound and lesser familiarity. It is an extravagant word, what my 8th grade English teacher would call a $10 word rather than a $1 word, the simpler, more familiar kind. Of course, far more decadent is the orgy a sectional is supposedly redolent of. Sex in itself is suggestive of decadence and the immortality mentioned in the previous sentence. Sex on a sofa, which is hardly necessary, even more so. And this is an orgy, sex in the extreme, sex out of bounds and out of control. And even this idea, Juno extends to the extreme, to the exotic Kama Sutra, and adding flexibility. So he's clearly talking about, and we're picturing, exciting sex. And then he adds leather, which when referring to a sofa is fairly ordinary, but not when sex is already in the picture. So now he would have us picture skin on skin. But really, he's using this analogy not just for the sex appeal or titillation, but because he wants us to recognize the appeal of leather in a sofa, the extravagance and the decadence it connotes, whether or not sex is literally in the picture. So you can see when you choose the right quotation, the thinking, interpretation, and explanation can expand and expand. For 4 quoted sentences, I have paragraphs of material, which I will not need to cut down to size, using only what is relevant. So here is the paragraph with the interpretation added. So I'm going to read from the quotation on. So I'll let you read the first part, and then the quotation, and then this is the interpretation. By claiming that sectionals are more than just couches, and then comparing them to jacuzzis, California, and sex, Juno points out their extravagance and ultimately their decadence. Sectionals are not just necessities. They are luxuries aimed at enjoyment, not survival. Juno takes the extravagance a step further by evoking extremes of enjoyment, the hedonism associated with jacuzzis in California, mentioning orgies, sex in the extreme. In the next sentence seems almost redundant. Juno, a New Yorker, clearly knows that for many non-Californians, California itself conjures up the image of freewheeling singles or couples having sex indiscriminately in their jacuzzis, peacock feathers optional. Though he acknowledges the association with recreational immortality, and notice this is a small quotation added in here back from the previous quotation, may be unfair, he doesn't contradict the image of sex and drugs in California overall as a den of iniquity. But of course, he is not really talking about California, but about sectionals and couches. And while it may be possible to have sex indiscriminately or drugs on one sectional, he is not describing literal activities but making an analogy. Even the tongue-in-cheek nature of his satire, however, cannot dispel the serious social criticism it uncovers. While the sex, drugs, and jacuzzis may simply be stereotyping and hyperbole, Juno is perceptive in pointing out the value we place on hedonism. Okay, so the last step of my paragraph is to connect the dots, creating a bridge from the interpretation of the quotation back to my point and finally to the thesis. The transition from one step and the next may not be apparent, especially if they're done effectively. But notice how toward the end I start opening my interpretation up from looking at particular passages and meanings to the overall purpose of the passage and author and relating it to my meaning. In this case, I'm picking up on and emphasizing the importance of hedonism. So here's the rest of the paragraph added in from this point at the end of this here, okay? Survival and mere necessities are no longer sufficient to make or keep us comfortable. We, quote, need luxury, pleasure in the extreme, pleasure for its own sake, and the sofa makes this luxury of comfort tangible. But we might also understand the word luxury to mean something that is rare and hard to come by, and comfort is often such a luxury for working adults, who outside their homes subject themselves and sacrifice their own comfort to others' wills. So we need access to comfort and feel we deserve it all the more in our own homes. So you can go back through and look at what we've written as a paragraph. Notice that there's a signal phrase, right? That's the phrase that introduced. That this is the signal phrase right here. Oops. In an article in Esquire, award-winning journalist Tom Juno describes the trend of the sectional sofa, emphasizing its decadence. An attributive tag is the part of that where you talk about who it is and where it was published. A blocked complete quotation, that's this quotation here, and the citation is right here. This is the page number where the quotation appears. There's also a short partial quotation that I pointed out down here. Association with recreational immortality. You'll notice that it doesn't have a page number because it's part of this previous quote. So it's already been, the place where it appeared has already been cited. Okay, so that is your long lecture on how to integrate sources effectively. You are going to be continuing this topic in your research quiz this week. You're going to read the Bedford Researcher Chapter 15 as indicated in this online research unit. And then you're going to watch the video Research Writing Integrating Sources. Then you're going to read Integrating Sources from the Harvard College Writing Program. It's a site that you can look at. And then you're going to take the quiz, Research Quiz Proficiency with Sources. And that will also be due on Monday, April 20th. You do not have to watch How to Avoid Plagiarism because you already watched it last week. Okay, finally, well, not finally, second to finally, whose names are unknown. We will be reading to the end of the Oklahoma section of this story. So you're going to read chapters 20 through 24. You will be assigned a chapter. Same as last week, the more creative you are, the more points you get. Remember, your final is going to be on this book, so do not stop working on this. Your initial post needs to be posted by Saturday at 11:59 p.m., and then your responses to your peers' post need to be posted by Monday at 11:59 p.m. Okay, so your body paragraphs are due on Monday at 11:59 p.m. Please turn in at least 2 body paragraphs from your research essay, and each of these paragraphs need to be at least 12 to 20 sentences long. That lecture I just gave you is all about writing a single body paragraph, so you understand the work that goes into constructing a body paragraph and choosing a quotation. So each paragraph should focus on a central idea and begin with a topic sentence that introduces the subtopic and shows how this topic relates to your thesis. The subtopic relates to your thesis. Each paragraph should develop and support one of the subtopics you've chosen to prove your thesis. And your paragraph should use evidence from at least 2 different sources to support the points that you're making. Please run spell check before you turn in your body paragraphs. And do not turn in an introduction or a conclusion yet. Please also use Smart Thinking and/or the Writing Center to review your document before you turn it in. You'll need to show evidence of that when you turn in your assignment. Please make sure your paper is in MLA format, Times New Roman 12-point font. Remember, if you have questions, I am just an email away. I'm happy to set up time with you if you need to do a one-on-one Zoom call. Also, if you missed our awesome research librarian presentation the Friday before spring break, please take a moment. I posted it within our class, so please take a moment to look at it. All right, that's it for now. Otherwise, I will see you online.